Well, thank you so much, Paul, and apologies for any delay, folks, on our part with technical difficulties, but I think that 6:02 is a good time to get started. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you this evening. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Andrew Butcher. I serve as Director of Innovation and Resilience for the Greater Portland Council of Governments. In that capacity, I serve as Director of the Maine Broadband Coalition, which hopefully some of you have engaged with us over the last year and a half, but we are a statewide network of organizations, governmental agencies, private companies, regional initiatives committed to affordable, reliable, universal broadband for everyone in Maine. More information can be found at mainebroadbandcoalition.org. And so it's my pleasure to serve as your facilitator this evening of the Aroostook County broadband conversation. We are incredibly pleased to have our distinguished guest, Senator Angus King, and DECD Commissioner Heather Johnson joining us this evening as presenters. We'll also be featuring Danny Sullivan from Down East Broadband Utility to discuss insights around community-owned broadband networks. And then after our presentations, we'll be having a Q&A with Aroostook County Partnership and Aroostook County Commissioner Ryan Pelletier around questions and considerations to be thinking about countywide broadband planning. So we are going to ask that folks use the Q&A feature for this evening's conversation. If you haven't used it, it's the little Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom menu. I will be monitoring the Q&A, as will Paul. We'll be combining questions together where possible and making every effort possible to revisit. So the purpose for tonight's conversation is to kick off a new collaborative approach to addressing broadband in Aroostook County. There are three really important points of context that I'm going to share in 1 minute or less, because I want to make sure we leave time for our distinguished speakers. But first, we as a state have funding in recovery to the pandemic via the American Rescue Plan, where broadband is an eligible and even preferred capital expense. So thank you, Senator King and staff, for all that you've done. There are new rules from the Department of Treasury which make it clear that local and regional decision-making have the authority to use the highest and to determine the highest and best uses of funding, especially as it pertains to broadband. And I'm sure Commissioner Johnson will be talking through a couple of the different considerations to be thinking about relative to ARPA funding as it pertains to the state strategy, and certainly as it pertains to county and municipality capabilities. The second key point of context is that broadband is critical. We're not going to spend tonight talking too much about why broadband is important. Hopefully, if you're here, this is something that you well recognize. This is a critical infrastructure as it pertains to remote work, distance learning, telehealth. This is the infrastructure of the future, and how we make the most of it is a critical opportunity. And we have an amazing opportunity for transformation throughout the state and certainly in Aroostook County. And then just lastly, that now is the time to be thinking about transformative solutions. The stacking of resources, financial, community partnerships will be essential to addressing connectivity needs for the future. And this will allow for both the optimal use of the technology and the funding that we have available to us right now. We have funding, broadband is critical, and now is the time to be thinking about transformative solutions and partnerships. And so we started a minute late, and hopefully I'm not finishing too late myself here. I do want to hand over, and Paul and team, I know that there was a scheduling potential glitch with the senator right now.
Correct. I just got a word from his scheduler that they did have the vote get changed a half hour later. So he'll join us if you could move through the agenda, and he'll hopefully jump on midstream here for us.
Absolutely. We can absolutely ebb and flow if Commissioner Johnson is willing to work with us. No rest for the weary for Senator King, for sure. But given the prominence of federal funding available at a state level right now, Commissioner Johnson, can I hand to you to speak through your section at this time?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andrew, and good evening, everyone. It's always really hard to follow Senator King, so I'm going to sneak in ahead of him, and maybe that will make it a little bit easier. Thanks for everybody for joining. I think these are always really good discussions as we think about shifting from, a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe we were having these discussions and really talking about why broadband is important. And whoop, we might want to go back to the senator. Good evening, Senator.
Hi, I just got down, I just voted on the voting rights bill. And I'm in my little hideaway, which is, I'll give you a tour. It doesn't take long. It's one little room in the basement of the Capitol.
Nice.
Very nicely appointed.
It's very comfy. I have some nice pictures of Maine. You can see all Maine art. But anyway, let me get set up here and we'll talk about broadband.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, Senator King, as you get set up, thanks so much for fitting us in amidst a busy schedule. We're just getting started, so your timing is good. It's a pleasure to see you again, and it's so wonderful to have you here. And thanks for making a minute to talk about rural broadband and the importance and the funding options now available to us as a state and to counties in particular like Aroostook.
Well, let me let you know sort of where things are standing. Andrew, thank you for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be with all of you. The pandemic taught us how important broadband is. I mean, I've been on this horse for 7 or 8 years, but finally, the stars seem to be aligning, and we're actually getting moving. But the pandemic showed us that kids couldn't connect to their schools. Seniors often couldn't connect on telehealth, which is a wonderful asset, particularly in a rural area where people don't have to drive all day to get to the doctor's office, and working from home. Thousands of Maine people worked from home during the pandemic without missing a beat. But if you lived in an area without broadband, you were out of luck. And, people had to go to the coffee shop and those kinds of things. So there's just no question that this is absolutely essential infrastructure. Now, in terms of funding, the good news is Mark Warner and I finagled and worked and pushed and tugged and poked, and we led getting that 10 billion into the COVID relief package that passed back in January. And that will produce, we think, around $125 million for Maine. And it's pretty unrestricted. It's for capital expenses, and it's designed to go to the states to use for broadband connection, particularly in rural areas. And the whole premise of our approach to this is that the states know best how to spend this money. We don't want to give it to the Federal Communications Commission or the Department of Agriculture. It tends to get very bureaucratic, and I don't think is as responsive as if it goes through the state. And of course, we now have the new, I think it's called the Maine Connectivity Authority, that's just been established. And I think the governor's talking about appointing the board here pretty soon. But so that there's over 100 million. Now, in the infrastructure package that's being negotiated right now is potentially as much as 65 billion additional, which would produce the way to, if you ever want to figure out how much money Maine gets when you hear a big number, multiply the national number by 0.4%. So if it's $50 billion, Maine's going to get 200 million. And so, am I doing my math right? 800 million. So there's a lot of money we hope is in the pipeline. Now there's a little bit of a skirmish going on here about how to allocate that money and whether it goes to the states or to the the FCC and, where it goes, but I'm pushing that it should go. Mark Warner and I are pushing that the money should best go directly to the states. Rob Portman is a co-sponsor of our bill, Michael Bennett from Colorado. The other piece that the people on this call should take cognizance of is that a ton of money has gone to the state and the localities, the counties and the towns, that's pretty much unrestricted, can be it's not unrestricted, but one of the permissible uses is broadband. So those of you who are interested in doing broadband in Aroostook County should be putting groups together, talking to the county, talking to your selectmen, or town council about putting together a regional group to do a broadband project with state money that's been allocated. We had the bond issue last year, the federal money that is already in the pipeline, and some of this local and county money, and we can do it. I mean, I think we're within hailing distance of really getting close to 100% coverage in Maine. And this is a big deal. I think it'll be transformative for our rural areas. And that's why I've been pushing so hard for it pretty much since I got down here. And like I say, you got to be patient, and every now and then things line up, and all of a sudden it looks like you can get it done. And that's exactly where we are right now. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to. I realized I did that math wrong, but anyway, 0.4% times 40 billion is that's what we might be facing, and that's a significant amount of money. And hopefully, it'll be enough, in addition to whatever has come on already, to really complete the job that Andrew and so many others have been working on. So that's the lay of the land right now. This infrastructure package, the bipartisan infrastructure package, a group of us are working on, is still a bit up in the air about how it's going to be paid for. There was a big negotiation today with the White House. I don't think it's resolved yet. At least it wasn't as of an hour ago. But the good news is broadband is on everybody's agenda. Republicans, Democrats, me, the White House, everybody considers broadband a hugely high priority for any infrastructure package. And so the only question is, how much will it be? Even the Republicans, the Republicans in their plan had 65 billion for broadband, and the White House had 100, I think. And so it's a question of how it's going to be allocated. So that's a catch-up figure, Andrew, and I'll be glad to take questions. But I got to tell you, this is, in some ways, this is now in the localities court to put the plans together. It's much better, I think, if you work together as a group of towns or a region and figure out how to do this. One of the things I think we ought to be thinking about is this is a bondable expense. This is a 30, 40-year asset. And just think of it like a road. And if the communities do it, I should mention one other thing that's in our bill. In some states, they've had prohibitions of municipal investment, of municipal ownership of this infrastructure. And we would sweep that away and say, we're going to have everybody play here. And one of the models that I like is having the municipalities build the infrastructure, and then let the providers come in and compete to provide the service over the wires. And that way you've got some competition, as opposed to now where there's not very much competition and the price is pretty high. So those are just some ideas, and I'm delighted to be able to spend some time with you. So let me know, is Heather on the line? I think I saw her, and I know she's engaged in this. Heather, bring us up to date on the new authority.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I think that's a great transition. So the Maine Connectivity Authority, which some of you on this call know as LD 1484, thank you for all of the support. That actually got the 2/3 that we needed for the emergency enactor. So that is officially going it has officially got the emergency enactor with it. So we will be standing up that organization immediately. The governor is reviewing board members now, and we're working with the legislators to get that in front of the Senate when they come back for veto day, one of the veto days when they're back. So we will actively work to get that board stood up in the next few weeks.
And that's the organization that's going to sort of distribute the funds. Is that the way it's going to work?
That's right. That's the organization that that now has multiple types of tools, including the ability to hold assets. Senator, to your point of some assets probably are better in the public domain, some assets might be better in the private domain. This organization has the flexibility and authority to hold assets, to offer patient capital, because some of these do pencil out over time. They just don't pencil out at a shareholder value rate or at a bank rate. And so, it allows for patient capital. It allows the new authority to take equity positions in projects so that they can own a piece. And one of the really important differences that, we can talk through a little bit is thinking about affordability on the front end. So affordability is a key challenge to access. And if we wired the entire state, we know not everybody would still have, it still wouldn't be accessible to everyone, even though the infrastructure existed. And so one of the challenges that we want to tackle on the front end is making sure that it is financially accessible to everyone as well. And so as we think about making these infrastructure investments, we want to make sure we have that inclusion lens so that it is universal access. And that's something that's really important. Right now, there are a couple of really good federal programs that are trying to help with that, right? Because they are sustaining monthly subscription rates for households with certain incomes. We think that is less sustainable over time than solving the problem once on the front end. It probably makes the front end be a little bit more expensive, but it certainly makes the tail a lot more successful. So that's a significant part of what this new authority will do as well.
Well, the folks who are watching from the county and the group that we're talking to today, if they wanted to do a broadband project in around the Holton area, what do they do? Who do they call? What do they do? What are the steps?
Yeah, so actually we are starting a couple of different things. One, there is a virtual tour around the state here in the next couple of weeks to talk about kind of who those contacts are and how to start plugging in. And Andrew, I think, is going to talk a little bit about that. So I won't step on you on that one, Andrew, but there is a really clear path to be able for them to plug in. And we think this stacked financial components of local, county, state, and private investment are what will get these projects across the line. So, so I think I'll defer. Andrew, do you want to jump in now maybe and do that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So yeah, and also, Senator King, we know you may have limited time, so thank you so much for being with us. And by all means, please stay as long as you are willing and able. And I will emphasize, you really hit the, per usual, hit the nail on the head in that it's a coordinated, multi-stakeholder regional process that is going to make the most out of the available funding. And you were talking about some of the numbers available, and I just want to emphasize that Aroostook County's allocation of American Rescue Plan funds is approximately 13 million. That's not including an allocation to any of the townships and municipalities. And
so that's just the allocation to the county itself.
That is just the allocation to the county, which is why tonight's conversation is truly an excellent start to what I think the Aroostook County Partnership, Aroostook County, Northern Maine Development Corporation have sort of conceived of as far as how can they facilitate a new approach to thinking about how to make the most out of these available funds. And we at the Broadband Coalition are trying to, frankly, take the Aroostook County lead in thinking about how to help support multi-sector stakeholder engagement process throughout the state, and allow for a consistent process at multiple counties. And so this is where, Commissioner Johnson, the role that Connect Maine currently serves, the new role that the Connectivity Authority will serve, These are important resources and existing structures in place. You've mentioned a little bit around the role of making investments in middle mile infrastructure to enable affordability and a higher degree of inclusion. You've mentioned a little bit about some of the federal programs available to help subsidize device purchasing, to help subsidize monthly rates. What are some other things, if anything, from your perspective that participants on tonight's call should be thinking about as far as ways in which to be engaging the state in addressing both digital divide issues, affordability, and universal access?
Well, I think there are a couple things. One is there are various models springing up across the state as to how to do this. And I think it's important that the people on the call don't feel they have to reinvent everything and they have to start from scratch. There's a model down in Washington County, something else over in Sanford, in the mid-coast. So that's where you and Heather and the Connect Maine people can say, okay, here, if this is what you're interested in, here's how it's being done, somewhere else. So you don't have to reinvent everything. The affordability is an important issue, but I'll tell you where I am on that. I'm uncomfortable with an ongoing subsidy of rates, because my experience with that kind of thing is that the rates will just go up to absorb the subsidy. Every time we raise Pell Grants down here for college students, college tuition goes up and nobody wins. And I'm a believer in a structural solution. That's why I talked about competition. I think it would be much more beneficial to the consumers in the long run if they had choices and if people were competing for their business, rather than saying, if you're with a certain carrier and we'll pay, $50 of your cost, because sooner or later the cost is going to go up by $50 and you're going to be back where you started. I mean, I'm betraying a bias toward structural competition here, and I think that's something the people should think about, is how do you structure this so that you have the maximum coverage, but also affordability in the long run, not just a short-term fix from the federal government. And that's why I think the majority of these funds will be used for capital. And this is very similar to rural electrification in the 30s, where the economic problem is the houses are too far apart to pay for the wires. And that's why the electric companies in the 30s said, well, we can't serve rural areas. And the Roosevelt administration invented rural electrification and the co-op system that got the wires out into rural America. And that's what we have to do. I think that's what we have to do on this. And this federal cost, the federal and state subsidies of the capital cost should lead to lower rates in the long run. So plenty of options out here, but as I say, this is the moment to seize them.
Well,
one of the interesting things too, Andrew, if I could just jump on what the senator was saying, is if we think about that infrastructure piece also from a community perspective, and how do we lower community costs, right? Because you are the anchor institution and you can build out to yourselves and your own needs. There's a lot there, right, to incent both the private sector and reduce capital costs for the broader projects. So I think that's a great way to facilitate competition as well.
Can I segue into this conversation just for a second?
Hey.
Danny,
How you doing there, Angus?
how are you?
I'm excellent.
For folks who haven't met you, Danny, allow me just a quick introduction. Our third panelist this evening, and I certainly invite Commissioner Johnson, please continue weaving in. I know that you've got lots more to be contributing. But just for folks who haven't met, Danny Sullivan is president of the Down East Broadband Utility, which is one of the state's shining examples of a community-owned network, which has been growing and going gangbusters. So Danny, thanks for being here and talking through your experience and model.
Yeah, I think what Angus had spoken of a little bit further back is exactly what we have done in the Calais-Baileyville area. And it's, we've put together this municipal network that has an incredible base service of 100 by 100 for $59 a month, with no installation costs, no data caps, none of that. and it's owned by the towns of the, Calais and Baileyville. And what's really unique and interesting is the town of Alexander just voted to join. We just, last week, the Indian Township, they now have voted to join. We're going to introduce one of their members from the Indian Township onto our board on this Thursday. The town of Princeton voted to proceed to try to get the initial infrastructure costs, what it would cost to actually do it. And the town of Cooper, where I live, is on their warrant for July to join the DBU. So, and there are other towns all around us that are trying to do this. So what we've noticed is obviously the demand was there, the need was there. And when we put the process out there, we did exactly what Angus was speaking to, is we allowed it an open access network. Any ISP can come there. And like I had said earlier before the call started, the argument from the ISPs has been all along, as Angus had mentioned, that it's too far to go to the 3 houses down at the end of a 6-mile run. They can't make any money at it. And we understand that. But in our model, we've taken away that. We've taken away the ISP's network costs. We've taken away their operation costs. We've taken away their maintenance costs. So they really have no argument now. It's like, why doesn't Spectrum, Consolidated, Charter, whoever, why don't they join in these municipal networks and sell their service and compete with the other ISPs? We know the answer to that is because they can make more money by not competing. And basically, in the cable system, they have their own roads. It's, in Maine, we have Spectrum. We don't have Comcast. New Hampshire, we have Comcast. We don't have Spectrum. So, there's no competing there. So that automatically brings higher costs and, more and less choices. And another piece to this too is the money that's now coming in. I noticed the RDOF funding that just went through, I think 40 million went to Starlink to put satellites in space. I can't tell you how much my head spins around when I think of taking $40 million and sending it into space. It's like, this technology is going to change. It changes every 10 days. So what are you going to do? Send 10,000 more satellites up because the ones up there don't do it anymore? It's like in a fiber network like we have in Calais and Baileyville and Alexander and these other towns. When something changes, we drive down the street to the cabinet, we replace the laser, and now you got the latest, greatest. That the infrastructure is in place for the next 100+ years. And Angus knows me well. I've been at his ear since 2011, I think it was, Angus. And my answer is put that fiber on every single pole like you did electricity and just get the job done.
Well, and the funny thing, Andrew, I got to say is that one of my colleagues down here, the senator from Alaska, is named Dan Sullivan. And periodically I've sent Danny emails and texts that I meant to send to the guy from Alaska and vice versa. He says, "Why are you bugging me about broadband?" I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, wrong Dan Sullivan." But what Danny has done in Calais Baileyville is I think a great model. And are you online, Danny? Do you have customers who are?
Oh yes, we figured in order to make this, to hit our sweet spot, we need a 30% take rate. We're now at 20. We believe we're going to cross that 30 by the end of the summer. In Alexander's case, I would be very surprised if we don't hit 80 or 90 right off the bat, because they have less options than Calais and Baileyville. In Indian Township's case, it'll be 100% take rate right off the bat.
So Danny, one of the greatest things about working on broadband is that everybody comes to the conversation at various different levels of experience and understanding. We're talking about a lot of terms and pretty important concepts, which mean a lot to those of us that are in it every day. But let's just right size real quick. Danny, just give a quick overview of the importance of take rate from your standpoint, especially relevant to a community ownership model, and why that is so important and what that has had to build from.
Yeah, the take rate it's important under any ISP will tell you that when they put their build out, they need a high take rate in order to recoup the expenses of actually building the network. In our case, we figure 30%, like I said, but in the municipal model, like ours is, that once that take rate continues and gets bigger and bigger, and we anticipate that it will, because just as a side note, during the COVID situation here, our network has been up and running with customers, has not gone down for one single second since we opened this thing up in 2018, where our competitors have gone down multiple times. But anyway, in a municipal situation, what happens is when someone pays their cable bill for $60 a month, a portion of that the ISPs send back to DBU, which then pays for the network, pays for the operation of the network. When this loan is paid, think about this going into the future. When this is all paid for, this is a revenue stream that comes back into these towns. Your water system doesn't give you a revenue stream, your sewer doesn't, your road doesn't. But this particular service, and we all know it's not going away. So the higher your take rate, the bigger the revenue stream coming back to these towns. It's a net positive.
Now, did you finance your project with a loan, with bonding? How did you finance the build out?
We went to each one of the towns. The towns voted that they would guarantee to pay these notes if the DBU failed. If we were unable to make this work, but we felt, and the towns did as well, it was unanimous, voted all the way through that, yeah, there'd be no problem with this paying for itself. And there won't be. We put it out to 4 local banks who were very eager to lend us money. And the way we structured it is we're operating off a line of credit right now. And next March, we will be back negotiating to a long-term, probably a 20-year note. So like in Alexander's case, well, Heather would know, they just got $145,000 in the Connect Me grant, which is wonderful. That is going to knock their $500,000 network cost down by that much. So, but in their case, as they build the network, the construction company says we need $10,000 to buy a spool of fiber. Alexander then contacts DBU. We talk back and forth, and then the banks transfer the money so that they can pay for it. So Alexander is not taking a lump sum all up front, and neither did Calais and Baileyville. But we will convert to conventional financing. Calais and Baileyville would love to be able to tap into some of this federal money as well to help reduce our exposure there. We kind of missed out with the Connect Me side because we already have service. We can't go ask for money. Alexander was able to because they're not connected yet. So Princeton, we're encouraging them to do the same thing, work through Connect Me and also through the programs you're talking about. And to your point about the counties, and like Washington County is going to get 6.7 million, is that I've been saying this to everyone who will listen. We have got to have people in the room that are sitting at that table when those commissioners decide how that money is going to be allocated. Because I've seen it go in wrong directions in the past, and I really think we need to stay focused.
Danny, the point that you're bringing up is really central to, I think, the reason for this conversation getting started. And it's the message I heard from Paul and Ryan and Jason and John in organizing tonight's call, is that at the end of the day, the communities that are ready, that are doing their process, whether they're thinking about a community ownership model like Downey's Broadband Utility, or they're thinking about another approach, there's a level of due diligence, there's a level of engagement that is going to be necessary, whether it's tapping into funding from the new Connectivity Authority, or whether it's working with planning grants through the current Connect Maine Authority. And so before my woeful job tonight is to keep us on time, because we have a really short window of time, and we're going to come to Paul and Ryan in just a minute to talk through some key considerations for Aroostook County's broadband planning efforts. But before I do so, Commissioner Johnson, is there anything else from a state of Maine standpoint that you want to speak to as to the state's role in coordinating and helping support county processes?
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew, because I think there are a couple of pieces where we can be helpful that aren't financial or aren't just about the finances, right? And because there are a number of resources as communities start to think about their approach and what their interests are and what path they want to take, right? What does the business model look like? What's the current situation and landscape? What are the surrounding towns? How hard is it to get to where you're trying to get to? Do you have a universal challenge, or do you have a certain set of streets or portions of streets challenge? Those types of things. And to the senator's point earlier, a lot of that work has been tackled in other places. And there are a lot of people that can come and help talk about at least what's happened in other places and what we can learn from, because there's no reason to have to relearn the same thing, right? Let's bring in these learnings. Let's give the local communities the leverage of that knowledge, and some of the tools and resources that we have as a state have procured, like mapping systems, like estimators for capital expense, things like that, as well as long-term funding and operating costs, so that people can have at least a sense, right? They aren't exact, but it will give it will give communities a good sense of what they're looking at. So I think there were some tools, as well as the financial piece, there were some tools and mechanisms that we can bring to bear as well.
To that end, we've been helping a lot of towns too. We've sent them our interlocal agreement, the legal work that we did. I've sent out the surveys we did. I've done the study, the feasibility stuff we've done. So a lot of towns have asked us, and I encourage them all to continue to do so. Like Angus has said, and you would just reiterated, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There are a lot of procedural steps that may look insurmountable that we can help other towns get over.
Absolutely. And this is also where we as a broadband coalition want to be as helpful and supportive as possible. Education is power. There's a number of good resources on the resources page, including some deep dives on municipally owned, community owned networks, what revenue bonding can look like. They're under, we'll provide a resource share link after today's webinar. But go to the mainbroadbandcoalition.org, and there's a number of good resources, videos, and recent webinars featuring Dan Sullivan, among many others. Again, I want to just shift gears here a little bit to our hosts and producing tonight, Paul and Ryan, as we talk through about why broadband really is important to Aroostook County and what some next steps might look like with your process. And just so folks know, and I'm giving you the heads up now, at about 6:55, we're going to really be opening it up to public Q&A. So just as listeners are thinking about it, now's a good time to get those questions moving. But Paul and Ryan, thank you so much for organizing tonight, and I'll hand to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. I've been listening in, some great stuff here, and Senator, appreciate your time this evening as well, and Commissioner Johnson and Dan. Remarkable what you've done down there, and certainly a model for the rest of the state to follow if they're going to jump on board with these community-based projects. And Ryan, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody. And just so I don't know if we mentioned it, but we have over 30 people watching this evening, which is really great, from all over the state. And so I wanted to just say welcome from Aroostook County.
Well,
yeah, I want to just sort of jump in here to explain what we're trying to do here in Aroostook County. We've talked about broadband for a long time up here, and I think we can all agree, as Senator King alluded to, it's not a political thing. We all want it. Every party wants it. Every region wants it. We all understand it. So I think the purpose of what we're trying to do this evening is really to get that word out that we're kicking something off here in Aroostook County. And we're hoping that we get a group of stakeholders involved with this, because it's not going to come out of Aroostook Partnership. It's not going to come out of NMDC. It's not going to come out of Ryan's office at county government here. It's going to be a collective of input from across the county that's going to help form what it is we need to do to sort of cross this digital divide here. So that's really what we're going to do. And I can tell you that I'm married to a realtor, and I hear the importance of what broadband means to property values. It's one of the top 2 or 3 questions that's asked every time someone's asking about a house. Is there broadband there? What's the internet speeds? Is it just DSL? These are the types of things that are real world. It's going to impact all of our property values if we can really build this out in a meaningful way. We hope we can say, yes, there is broadband there. It's everywhere. Come to Aroostook County, live here, work here. So that's
Paul, I don't think there's a single thing that we could do in Maine that would have the impact that this would have. Short-term and long-term, real estate prices, young people, keeping young people in the state, opening up employment opportunities for people in rural areas, seniors being able to do telehealth and not have to take a day to drive to Eastern Maine or wherever they have to go. I mean, it's the single most important thing. I think that if there's one thing we could do to push Maine forward, I think it's this.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about this ad nauseum during the 10-year strategic plan for while we were building that for the state of Maine. And this just came up in almost every goal that we had. It was somehow tied to broadband, improving broadband access to high speed and getting it everywhere. So yeah, it's really, really key. Obviously, educational opportunities, we understand what it does for those. We saw it firsthand with COVID-19 during the pandemic here. We also witnessed, the inequities of students and teachers that were challenged with their connectivity. So we hope to be able to address that. It really is a true digital equalizer for us.
We have a real world.
Ryan, I'm wondering if you also want to just weigh in a little bit on both why is this so important from a county administration standpoint, and in particular, we've touched a little bit on it, but also what's unique about now from your perspective?
Well, the senator's point about telemedicine is really accurate. Maine has a lot of roads, but we don't have a lot of good public transportation options. So as we saw during the pandemic, we had a lot of senior citizens here in the county that needed access for their healthcare appointments. And the lack of broadband in some areas was really a challenge for a lot of families trying to meet that. I also think now is a good time because we do have this funding from the federal government. I mean, as it was mentioned earlier, Aroostook's receiving $13 million. And we're going to do things a little differently here in Aroostook. We're working in partnership with our local municipalities who want to participate in this program to forge really a new alliance and help guide the investments, not just in broadband. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of other projects that we'll need to fund, but get their voice at the table from the beginning. And that's a commitment that Aroostook County government's made to this project or this endeavor, and we plan to stick with that. You're on mute, Andrew.
The first time tonight, I did it. I won. So, Paul and Ryan, we're talking about sort of this kickoff to an ongoing county process and engagement. And as you know, many regions around the state and the US are certainly organizing to address broadband deficiencies. And so it does sound like this is what you're hoping to do from an Aroostook County standpoint. Talk to us a little bit around what you anticipate this process looking like, and what you are hoping for both from participants as well as the rest of the community at large.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick it off, and Ryan can share some of his thoughts on this as well. Again, we've talked about it for a long time. We believe now is the time. It's really not about, should we do it? It's really about, can we afford not to do it? We don't want the county to fall behind, and I'm sure the rest of the state doesn't want to fall behind the rest of the nation either. So now is the time. And so as I mentioned, we have to build this committee. We want to get this committed group of stakeholders that really understands the imperative behind this, and we want to build this plan together. How we pay for this, who knows? We've heard Angus talk about a lot of the future funding that's going to come up Maine's way, in addition to what's already been earmarked for Maine. So we believe that the funding, a lot of it's going to be there, but there's also going to be a lot of partnering that gets involved from the town municipality perspective, from county government. I think together with a lot of organizations pitching in together, we can deal with the financial aspect of this, of building this out. So, we want to have shovel-ready projects, because we're already hearing about, we're spending some bond money here because projects have been well thought out. They're in queue, they're ready to go, and they've got good, solid business plans, and they've got communities that are sold. So we want to be in that situation ourselves and take advantage of some of this funding. So, and we want to do it with, I know there's a lot of talk about we can do this better oftentimes than the ISPs can. Right now we want the ISPs at the table. They know the networks. They've built what we have already. They know what they've got coming for some of the federal funding, like RDOF funding. They've got a plan to do a lot of this already. We need to make efficient use of our funds in order to do this in a way that we don't don't spend too much too quickly and bankrupt the whole process. So whatever it is we decide to do, we want them at the table. We want to use their expertise, and we want to involve them in whatever way they're comfortable getting involved.
Yeah. And from the municipal perspective, we have to keep in mind, we have 55 towns, 2 cities, and 110 unorganized townships in Aroostook County, all of various sizes and needs. And they're going to go through their own prioritization as to what they think is important in their own communities. I think what's key for us is what works for Allagash might not work for Presque Isle. So we want to have a very broad discussion with as many municipal leaders as possible and invite them to share their thoughts on this with us. I think it's really important to get everybody's opinion at the table. And as Paul mentioned, the private sector funds a lot of these projects right now. We certainly want them at the table as well.
Ryan, I'm sitting here thinking one thing you could do from the county point of view is offer matching to the communities. That would entice them to get into the game.
Yep.
and make the dollars go further. And then we have the state, the state has money and the federal money that's coming in. But yeah, these are my old public broadcasting days. Remember, every $60 and $120 contribution will be matched by an anonymous donor. So, but I think matching is one way to go, that the county could use its funds and make it go further.
Yeah, that's exactly the right way of thinking.
I would like to just want to suggest something here, but obviously most people that know me know I'm a very strong advocate of a fiber network, and I'm not an advocate of much else. And the reason for that is when you go doing these projects, like in Aroostook County and across the rest of Maine, you should be looking at something that you can do it and do it once. That we have gone at this so many different ways, and we have to go back and do it again and again. And back to the rural electrification, comparison, when they put that electricity up on the telephone poles, they didn't say Aroostook County is going to get 12 volts and Washington County is going to get 120. They said everybody's going to get what they need in order to make this work. And I think by keeping in your heads that putting a fiber connection cable on every telephone pole in this state will get you that future-proof. They haven't been able to capacitize fiber yet. They have no idea how much data they can put on it. They estimate it'll be up there for at least 100 years. That's a pretty sound investment.
So, one of the things as we get ready to transition here, I see a couple questions coming in, and Paul, happy to turn that direction when the time is right. But I will say, as you all know, half of my time in orientation is here in the greater Portland region. And I have to say the level of multi-agency collaboration that you all have and the track record of success that you have in Aroostook County. We had a conversation about trying to organize countywide dialogues around this, and you jumped on it right away. And are recognizing the role of the county and recognizing the need for sub-regional stakeholder engagement. What do you need from a coalition standpoint, from a state agency standpoint, from a federal agency standpoint, from an ISP standpoint? What do you need to be able to help support these conversations and stakeholder engagements? How do you continue to fuel this already strong multi-organizational collaboration that you have in place?
You asking me?
I'm asking Paul. I'm asking you,
Yeah.
and Ryan, and we'll go from there.
Hey, I'll take a stab at this. I think what we need is what the state is already committing to. They're showing that they're behind broadband. I think that with the formation of the new agency that's going to help direct the funding that's coming our way, it shows there's a great commitment. And I think with that's going to come more and more expertise that we can call on to help get our communities behind this. Because again, we can't mandate something. Ryan and I can't, and NMDC can't say Aroostook County is going to do this, and each community is going to give up 5% of their budget for the next 20 years to build it. You're going to have a mutiny on your hands. So we must first get them all behind us, and I think the state can help in that process through some of the sharing some of the folks like Dan's expertise in blazing these new trails that they did down east here. And just, Heather's had many years experience working for Connect Maine as well. There are so many people that have walked this trail before us that we're going to be calling on to help us sort of herd the cats in the right direction here, and then we'll figure out the funding piece of it.
I think too, taking an assessment of what works best for the county as a whole, but also realizing that we are the largest county east of the Mississippi, and depending on who you talk to, there are 3 to 5 subregions of the Aroostook County. Maybe regionalizing this some way at a sub-regional level might make some sense to explore as well. And I think getting out in the communities, we're doing this webinar tonight, but I think after this, getting out and actually having conversations with folks in the different regions about what their thoughts are and what we can all do to work together will be a good way to move forward.
Well, I do, Paul, if it makes sense, I do see a question or two here. And again, I want to encourage audience members to contribute questions via Q&A. Kenneth Murchison asks, we're hearing about many funding sources. Are these typically for shovel-ready projects, or is the funding for planning efforts as well? Commissioner Johnson, you want to take the first pass?
Yeah, I'll start there. I think there are both, right? We need both to be ready. I think it's really easy to fall into the shovel ready, show quick progress mode, and we'll, I'm sure, do some of that. But Connect Maine does have planning grants available. It is important to do the work that you all are doing tonight, and that you've all started. And Ryan, you mentioned it, right? How do you make sure you get the right fit for each of the areas and make sure that those can coalesce around a broader package? And so that planning work takes a little bit of time, and it takes this type of collaboration. And so there are funds to support that as well. And there will continue to be funds to support that. There will be funds to support projects that are ready to roll. And frankly, we've got a lot that are in the middle there. They've done a lot of this work, but they haven't quite gotten it over the finish line yet. And so we need to be able to, the new Maine Connectivity Authority needs to be able to be adaptable and partner really closely with communities, counties, Connect Maine, and others to kind of meet all of those groups where they are.
And from the county perspective with the ARPA funds, the feds did a really good job, thank you, Senator, of making sure that legislation contains provisions that this money doesn't have to be spent really quickly. It gives us some planning time. We have until December 31st, 2024. And if we have projects under contract by then, we get another 2-year extension. So that's 5 years to really work through some of this. So our thought right now in the county is offer the funding out in these grants that we're talking about in allotments. So maybe open a round in the fall for some spring projects, and then another round in the summer for some fall projects. So the projects are ongoing, and it gives local municipalities and nonprofits whomever might be partnering with us time to do some of that planning work so that they are in the queue to apply when a round opens.
One of the things to the senator's match conversation, I think once the legislature approves the Maine Jobs and Connectivity package and the earmarking and some of that, I think we can help look at scheduling too, to make sure that we hit construction timelines, back up into planning, some of that. And then that might help, Ryan, as you look at your timing, you might be able to say, well, okay, their projects are gonna go out then, they'll need match with them. And so we'd have to be here. And so, I think there is a calendar that we can create that allows people to really work collectively.
As we talked about, there's a pretty steep learning curve at a community basis as far as thinking about what is RDOF and what does that mean, what's eligible and what's not. How do we think about different technologies and how they address both short-term and long-term? What's the financing options? What's the ownership and operating models? There's a lot of different things from a consideration standpoint. And so, as you embark upon your listening tours, as you think about how to engage communities in the process. How can statewide partners be helpful to you, the Aroostook Partnership, and to you in the county, in thinking about adding capacity at that local level? What are the types of resources? Are they webinars? Are they AmeriCorps volunteers? How can you help boost your capacity for that engagement, that data collection process?
Hey, you hit the nail right on the head. Data collection. One of the things I said early on is we have to really assess where we are before we figure out where we want to go. And I think that the Broadband Coalition mapping tool is phenomenal. I've been forwarding the link to that thing repeatedly to my membership, encouraging everybody, especially out in the country, on the roads we're talking about. We're not talking about Presque Isle proper, the downtown Caribou. We're talking about the folks that don't have it right now. Those are the folks that we want to get on that thing, so we can better understand what are our roads look like at a glance model. And that's a great tool. So whatever either Broadband Coalition or Connect Maine or the new authority coming up can do to help us really map that out, so we can know where we're starting from. I think that's important.
Ryan, any responses? And I'll buy you a second in that I'm contractually obligated to both thank you, Paul, for that shout out, but also for folks who are not familiar with the Broadband Coalition speed testing effort. If you go to the main broadbandcoalition.org, the very first thing you see is running a speed test. And what's important about that is that it allows for you to both take a speed test and understand how well your internet service is performing and who provides it. And that creates a real-time data point on a map that you can also look at and zoom in on. And you begin to see patterns of where there's service and how well it's performing. And that serves as a really, really important engagement technique. And it really helps the state in thinking about their decision-making as far as served areas and underserved areas. And so again, speed testing for those that are just trying to think about how to get a picture of internet service in Aroostook County could be a really useful starting point. So thank you, Paul, for that. And Ryan, I'll hand back to you.
Just, I agree with the data collection for sure, but also continue the partnerships that the state has right now with some of the state associations that our municipalities belong to, such as the Maine Municipal Association, Maine County Commissioners Association. Those folks get the word out to their members really quickly, and they're respected and listened to by their members. So it's really good to get information to them, to get it out to the locals. I think that's one way to continue that partnership that would help us greatly here.
Well, that is another fantastic point, Ryan. Thank you, because it's for that reason the Broadband Coalition is going to be taking again your lead in organizing a statewide conversation with some of those associations on Friday morning at 9 a.m. Again, we'll share details with folks if they're interested, but co-hosted by Maine County Commissioners Association, Municipal Association, School Management Association, Emergency Management Association, right? One of the things that we feel is that there's a need for getting this diverse stakeholder involvement in the planning process. And, I really would welcome your thoughts and insights as to the role of school districts, the role of health districts in your planning and engagement process. There is capital available and the ability to sort of identify priorities and align resources accordingly.
I just wanted to add one thing to that, to the previous question. There is a way that the state can help lower the cost of this, and I think that's through that. And I can't remember what bill it was this session. I'm not even sure the status of it. I just got it was like a cyclone the last week or two here with the bills, but it was the one where one service company handles all the wires on the pole, and I think that really reduces costs dramatically, or it has the potential to. And Commissioner, maybe you know where that bill ended up. Did that pass? Where is that?
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'm happy to tag team. I think you're referring to LD 1219. which was a bill to establish a third-party administrator to have a designated role in managing both the data and facilitating the state's make-ready process, right? How we get communications gear on utility poles is a real bottleneck in the overall state process. And so this was a bill to essentially resolve for the Public Utility Commission to establish a stakeholder process to do so. And I think I'm glad that the Public Utility Commission probably is going to be embarking upon that irrespective of the bill, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
They did make,
That's one of those pieces that doesn't take legislation. There was legislation there. It doesn't take legislation for them to tackle that. Right. There are a lot of challenges with kind of this they call it one touch make ready, right? And how do we do that? One of them being, we don't have a statewide asset inventory. And so there are lots of pieces to that are fairly complicated. So I think a lot to come there, Paul, but there are significant changes we can make in that process to speed up the process. Part of it is the time to market. For some of these projects, it's months to get on a pole and right. So we've got to reduce that. And then it's cost to get on the pole and it's cost monthly ongoing operating cost challenges. So there's a lot there. Go ahead, Danny.
there was some changes made a couple of years back, which helped our project in particular. They Public Utilities Commission allowed us to attach to the bottom of the pole, the back of the pole, or the side of the pole. That one change reduced our cost by $145,000, our make-ready costs. Presently, we're under the restriction of we're doing the Alexander project. Consolidated can take up to 170 days to allow us the right to be able to attach something to that pole, which Eastern Maine Electric owns some of our poles. We get the permission from them within days. So it puts these projects behind where, so if the state, I don't know if that bill did pass or didn't, but in order to have a third party administrator looking at this with a more taxpayer centric focus, I think would be a huge improvement.
Danny, we've got a couple of really good questions coming in here with just a few minutes left, but Hugh Kirkpatrick asks, in Caribou, we are considering the open model like Down East Broadband Utility, which would be owned, constructed, and operated by the Caribou Utilities District. What advice or guidance can be provided to Maine legislators and or the PUC, which we would need to approve a modification to our charter so they are not confused by a water and wastewater district taking on this endeavor? Great question, Hugh. This is awesome.
I'm not sure I understand it, so give me
Well, I think this could be a question both probably for some of Ryan's input, probably for Commissioner Johnson as well.
So the Caribou Utilities District, just so Dan understands, is the district that provides water and sewer in Caribou right now. And so it would be that special district taking on broadband as part of their charge.
Okay. We set up we're a nonprofit. That's how that's how we're structured. We're not part of the utility systems in these towns. We're a separate piece of them. I don't see any downsides to this becoming one more. It is a utility, and in my opinion, I think that's a great model to go with. You've already got the infrastructure there. There's just taking on the additional piece of broadband. There's a little bit of a learning curve there, but I think keeping it in one place is a great idea.
Commissioner
They can
Johnson.
they can put the fiber through the water pipes, Danny. How about that?
Anywhere it can go, Angus. I don't care how they do it.
Dig once, dig once.
Yeah, exactly. Dig once. Commissioner Johnson, anything you would want to weigh in there as far as the Caribou Utilities District?
No, I mean, I think you already have some infrastructure that helps, right? You already have people and you already probably have some kind of financial model, and there's a lot of pieces you may already have. There are some pieces that are very different, and there is some work that you will need to do with the PUC to get that set up. But
Andrew, I think what you're touching upon here and that question illustrates what people need more than anything else right now is information. There are multiple financing options out there. There's money in the pipeline. There's experience around the state. And I would think that either the new Connection Authority or the Broadband Coalition, one of the things you could do that'd be the most helpful is to publish a kind of template manual and take all of Danny's documents. That would be chapter 1. And then somebody else has done it a different way. That would be chapter 2. And give these towns that are thinking about this a sort of menu of, here are the choices that you need to make, and here's how it's worked in other places. I think there's, I think what you're going to find is everybody wants to do this. They just need to know, where to start.
Yeah.
Well, you absolutely are beating me to the punch in it, because later this summer, the Broadband Coalition will be launching a resource page that is that copy and paste folder of documents to be able to utilize for existing models. But I also want to highlight, and again, we'll be forwarding these links to attendees afterwards. We will be launching a community of practice training cohort. There have been some really good examples throughout the state of broadband committees who have gone through sort of a focused educational curriculum. And so we will be looking to expand upon that. We will be looking to provide as much guidance and support to this community of practice. And then lastly, I do want to highlight that the Broadband Coalition is launching a forums feature to our website. Think about it as like a Google group, but explicitly for Aroostook County in your planning processes, a repository for the conversations and commentary and sharing of documents. Right now, it's available on the Broadband Coalition page under news. There's a forums button, and then there's an Aroostook County forum page. And on that, you also will be able to download the existing speed testing report for Aroostook County. So those are 2 small tools that I'm looking to share with you all, and hopefully are useful. Paul, I can see you wanting to chime in, and I do want to be mindful of folks' time this evening. It's 7:09. We've kind of gotten through the questions through Q&A, but I know this is just a start to the conversation. So I'll say thank you so much for the opportunity to join and to be a part of kicking off this conversation. I look forward to staying a part of it. Paul and Ryan, I'll hand to you to close for this evening.
I think we do have a couple more questions, Andrew, that came in. So I think we could quickly answer those first. Representative Underwood is asking what state agencies will specifically be receiving the funds for broadband. I think, Commissioner, maybe you could answer that question.
Yeah, so the Maine Jobs and Recovery Act, the unallocated funds will go into the Maine Connectivity Authority. The earmarked funds for broadband will go there as well. The current bond funds are at the Connect Maine Authority, and those 2 groups will work very closely together once they're stood up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, without any other questions, I know we're just at 7:10, which I'm pretty proud that we stayed on our schedule here. I just want to thank all of our guests for taking time to join us, because we think a lot about Aroostook County, and it demonstrates that you as well haven't forgotten about us way up here. So appreciate your time and effort to join us. And we're at the crawl stage on the crawl, walk, run thing here, and we really want to build this consensus. I think we're heading in that direction. And thank you, Andrew, for hosting, moderating our event this evening. And I think we've kicked this thing off well. Now we roll up our sleeves and get some work done.
Wonderful.
Ryan?
All right.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you, Senator, for participating. It's really great to have that kind of federal support. Look forward to seeing you all in person soon.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. Thank you, Senator. Have a good night, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Listen, would you guys up in the county check on Sharon Campbell for me? Be sure she's, doing some work up there.
I did get an email from her today, Senator, so I can tell you she is still alive.
It really hurts when I'm on the street in Presque Isle and people say, "Who's that guy with Sharon Campbell?" It's painful. It's nice to see you all. Thank you so much. This is great.
Bye, Senator.
Look forward to seeing you in person.
Likewise.
Good night.
Good night.